people with microphones? Come on, somebody has a question.
While we have questions, can I add something here?
Oh, yes, you may.
Because we were talking at the last panel was talking about who are we and who names us. Why are we the Third World Liberation Front? And why isn't this the Third World Liberation College? The Third World Liberation Front arose out of our solidarity with the people of the Third World who were oppressed, who were colonized, who were just taken over by all the large powers. And they met in Bandung and had a conference, and they called themselves Third World. And we were in solidarity with those nations and with those people who were fighting oppression. And that's why we became the Third World Liberation Front. Am I right? Okay. Yes.
Hello, culture as a whole. You mentioned one thing about how Filipinos are predominantly conservative.
Certainly, is that the question or what?
No, I just wanted to say that now I feel like a lot of Filipinos are conservative because in the recent 2016 elections, I read somewhere that Chinese and Filipinos voted for Trump significantly more than other Asian populations. And I wanted to know, as students and people who are going to be, voting for the rest of our lives, what can we do to help, I guess, change our parents? Question mark?
There's something that I wrote a number of years ago, and this is what I said to students 40 years ago. It's in some manual or some pamphlet that somebody wrote. And I said, I believe it is our moral obligation to assess the campus's social and political atmosphere in relation to ourselves and our respective third world communities, on and off campus. You are aware of what's going on, you are aware of issues, and obviously you have an obligation to see what you can do, and everybody else, what you can do to try and explain to others why. The other thing I would say, I have a son and his wife there, they work at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's a liberal campus, quote. Not as liberal as here, but a liberal campus. But I just spent a month in Michigan on a lake. And on that lake, they had pontoons with support Trump. We need to remember that while you're trying to convince your own parents and friends of why things need to change or why things are happening, you also need to make sure that you understand that that is not necessarily the case other places. And I would hope those of you, once you leave this school, hopefully you can go to these other parts of the country and have some influence. Because, as I said, I mean, we're in California, we're in San Francisco, but other parts of the country really do not agree with much you've heard today. And the problem is, it's almost, in my opinion, worse today. Not in the same respect, because you do have representation and stuff like that, but boy, the politics of today are very scary, and we could do things way back then, and we still have to. So I'll add it, because other people may have questions. Thank you.
We really failed to appreciate the talent, work, and abilities of women during this experience. Looking back on that period, the body of work that the women performed was extraordinary. And I want to say that for other than Roy Harrison and maybe one other male, the whole legal defense system that made it able for us to continue to bring people out of jail and back on the picket line was handled by women. I'd go beyond that to the work that I did with LASO and saw the leadership that came out of the Black Panther Party as more and more men were being assassinated by the FBI and the police department, the black women's leadership was extraordinary. And talk about maintaining a focus on the community and the orientation of what the concerns of the community were articulated over and over and over again by their leadership and their commitment in terms of seeing to it that their programs addressed the concerns of their families, their children, and their community. They were just really exceptional. The other thing that I would go back to and just move on to other mistakes would be on my own part. When I left the campus in the spring of '69 after the strike, I got involved into some differences with Dr. Wong Martinez. And you've all heard how significant he was in regards to the development of not only the Chicano Latino clubs, but also the development of TWLF. But he and I got into some personality issues, and we broke a relationship, and unfortunately it impacted our relationship between the Rossetti organization and the campus. And so that was another mistake, right? But also I want to acknowledge the contribution by not only Dr. Juan Martinez, but also Chiri Contreras and Juan Pifere was just an exceptional human being. He was from Argentina and had a lot to do with my education in regards to U.S. involvement in Latin America. So I mean, these folks are just totally memorable and supportive. On top of that, Carmen and Wong, Chewy, Dr. Rivera were all part of putting together, Dr. Wong, putting together the LASO studies. And again, I mean, I relate this back to you as students to appreciate the fact that that program was essentially built by students, graduate students, undergraduate students, and the willingness to step forward and put together the curriculum and deal with all the issues that had to be dealt with in regards to getting it solidified.
Can I try one thing? I want to mention Sonny Arenito. Sonny Arenito was part of PACE. He was actually Native American. He left and he's been across the bay for many years. The other important thing, and I get this after the strike was all over, we had a political group called Power to the People. I don't know if people remember that. And it was for student body elections. And as was said earlier, basically the liberal leftist side had taken over the student government and we controlled the budget. I know I was chair of the finance committee for quite some time. And that helped fund the work study and all these other sort of things. I think one of the biggest mistakes we made after the strike was we could have controlled the student government. We ran on Power to the People and we won. We won the election. Hayakawa invalidated the election. He went ahead and he invalidated the election. And we decided we were going to stand on principle and boycotted the election. So the next election, the other side won automatically because there was nobody, and that went to court, and the court decided, well, it was a valid election. As I think back, we probably shouldn't have done that. We probably should have participated. So sometimes you stand on principle. You really need to evaluate whether you really want to do that, or you want to see what your chances are of winning. And you should not always just think, I'm going to stand on principle, particularly if you can win.
I'd like to, I think that one of the real mistakes we made was that we allowed much of the leadership of both the Black Student Union and the Third World Liberation Front to be arrested and put away. A number of us went to jail. Also, a number of us went to prison. And therefore, much of some of the ending aspects of the strike, the settlement, whatever, was hampered because many of the people who were working diligently to bring about some of these important things were not there. Also, I think we made a mistake in not bringing the Black Student Union and the Third World Liberation Front even closer together. I think that, and the result of that was, many of the time, the things that were said or things that were spoken were noticeably done by the Black leadership. And I think that had we not allowed that type of continuum to continue, had we let Ron Quidachay or Mason Wong or Roger Alvarado or Carmen or Donna or other people who were just as knowledgeable, just as articulate, speak on some of those issues, I think that we would then not been so isolated. I think that it is imperative that you understand today, as we began to understand 50 years ago, that our commonalities, the oppression that we all are suffering from, is much more overwhelming than the differences that settler colonialists put in our heads and make us believe as important as the differences are important. It's really, really important that we understand what our unity and what our principles of unity are. These are some of these things are philosophical, some of them are ideological, some of them are political, and some of them are relational. And it's important that, just as we should have learned 50 years ago, you must learn today that you work with people based upon your commonalities. That you do not allow white supremacy. You do not allow fascism to come in and grow these seeds of separation. This is vitally important today as it was 50 years ago, and it will be important ongoing.
One of the things about the Third Revolution Front, one time Carmen Carrillo got me and Don Smothers, me a member of Cincinnati and Don Smothers, a member of Presidium, took us over to Berkeley because there was happening struggle in Berkeley too. What happened over there is that the black students over in Berkeley told the white students that they were going to have some kind of cotillion or some kind of something and for them to stop. So Carmen took us over there to this auditorium, and this auditorium filled with white students. I mean, it was packed. I mean, more double here, you know what I mean? So we told them white students, the hell with them, the black students said, the struggle must continue. You're not going to take one group of students because of their interest to stop the struggle. So in other words, basically, one of the most important things, I understand, to deal with as Crutchfield, women must be the leaders of the struggle. Must be the leaders of the struggle. But not only a purpose, because basically all indigenous societies before the creation of Catholic Church and all that other stuff, right? Christianity and everything, were women. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, no matter what, the struggle must be about all people. I mean, and basically at this particular time, class is very important, class. Because right now, middle class is deteriorating. In fact, all these these loans they didn't put on y'all, y'all gotta revoke this. I mean, that's absurd.
You got a question in the back?
Yes, my name is Lisa Gutierrez Guzman, and I'm a veteran of the strike. But I'm going to talk about one minority or that was a term that oftentimes people used back then, but that was not mentioned. The group of people that are multiracial like myself. My great-grandfather was a Buffalo soldier, African American. My father was from the Philippines, from Chinese and Spanish background, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My mom is from Delight, Arkansas, Caucasian and Native American. So I really was mixed. So when I got involved in the strike, I had just turned 18. And the very next month, the strike happened. And I said, well, where do I go? And what do I do? And to be honest, I did check out PACE. My dad was born and raised in the Philippines. And I agree with your constructive criticism there, that it wasn't exactly the most militant one in the world. I eventually joined the Strike Support Committee, which some people call the White Strike Support Committee, and I joined Students for a Democratic Society. But looking back, the commonalities are what worked for us. That's how we won the strike, because we had people of all different ethnicities participating in the strike, including a whole bunch of people that were not at all third world. So I think we have to remember that, because we may not have won it if we had not had so much of the campus shut down.
Exactly. That's good. Thank you. I think you've heard from various of us, and we've talked about our difficulties getting together and overcoming obstacles, whether they were interpersonal or ideological, but we overcame them, because that's what it's about. We have to be together, we have to overcome our difficulties, we have to coalesce, and we have to move forward. 50 years ago, we were part of a historical movement. We weren't just individuals who wanted to do things. There was something going on all over. Vietnam was ravaging Southeast Asia. Our black and brown soldiers were coming home in body bags. We were being repressed in our freedom of speech. All of these things were happening. The House Un-American Activities Committee was holding hearings, trying to get good people behind bars. Several of us, I'm not going to name names or say who, but we were persecuted by the FBI, by the Secret Service, and by other agencies of government. Why am I saying that? Because I think today there's a similar thing going on. I mean, history has put us today in a situation. I don't know if it's equal or worse, but it's bad. And there are terrible things going on throughout the world, and we cannot, just go to our class and not think about what's going on. We can't alienate ourselves from the suffering of our brothers and sisters elsewhere. So we have to, just be. Who are we? We are part of our humanity. We need to be active. We need to overcome our personality conflicts, our ideological issues, and we need to move forward together.
My name is Alejandro Vila. I'm an LTNS major and Ahmed minor. I want to thank y'all for your efforts and the struggle you participated in to allow people like me and generations to, expand and further ethnic studies. I want to address what Roger said in the beginning and what Nesbit said about fascism and not allowing it to spread. This school, in my time at this school, I faced a lot of adversities, just involved with student activism and everything. As you know, there's Zionists organizing on campus. They've got their settlement. Arab and Muslim students are constantly and faculty are constantly under attack. There's several Title IX cases that are being ignored. There's a lot of problems, and I think what it all comes down to is people's apathy, and in terms of organizing, and that's mainly why nothing's going down. And also the administrative bureaucracy, how it has completely choked student activism through time, place, and manner regulations, and just scare tactics, right? And losing your position here at school, or your job or whatever. So I just want to address that, and how do we move forward the apathy and institutional blockage when it comes to activism and fighting fascism. Thank you.
You're trying to deal with the bureaucracy and administrative control, the limitations that they placed on students. So what happened during the strike and right after the strike is that the state moved in, the CSU moved in and put the kibosh down on student funding. So everything became much more complicated and difficult in order for it to happen. Looking at what is possible, especially if you have to deal with elections being voided, then I think what you're talking about is developing an alternative student body identity, right? And that means that you begin to coalesce around particular groups who want to be represented and have a voice, and who come together to speak in a common cause. And that as that body grows, you begin to challenge the existing structure as to who is really representing the interests of the students. When you consider the amount of money that the students are contributing to the operation of the institution, you begin to realize what the core restraint is, right? Because you're not only talking about yourselves and your financial investment, you're also talking about your families and their investment, right? What are the consequences of you coming to this school paying this price to go to this school? You can talk to any student on this campus about that, and you would have a hard time finding somebody who would not have some identity in what you're talking to them about. So there's two, you can look at this two ways, right? One of them is to go try to get within the system. At the same time, the alternative is to do something more independent that would give you a lot more independence to be able to move and have a voice, right? This system has so many different ways of neutralizing and or eliminating any kind of action you want to get involved in, which is why you want to look at doing things more on an independent basis. You can identify yourselves as students of this campus, but you can also identify yourselves as students of CSU. If you are serious in terms of addressing the conditions of the tuition you're being paid, you need to establish relationships with other campuses, with other students, not necessarily with the associated students. You can use that as an avenue, but if you're really serious in terms of addressing it and building a base upon which you can go after, not that you can go after tuition, which would include your families and your communities, right? Because it's also in their interest to see that these tuition issues are resolved and they're more affordable, right? This is crazy, right? We pay $28 to go to school, right? If you multiply that times 40, you guys are still paying more than that for going to school here. If you look at the cost of living between now and then, it hasn't gone up 40 times. And yet, that's exactly where you are in terms of what you're paying for what you're getting. You're not getting what you're paying for. And you need to hold people accountable for that. And you need to do that as a block, not just at San Francisco State, but as a whole coalition of students and their families addressing what's happening. One other thing for me is the lack of access to the representatives on all levels, right? And so, along with the idea of bringing people together to deal with tuition, I ask you to consider the possibility of going after recall. Going after some kind of statute that would make it possible for citizens to recall their representatives when they don't act in their interest. Because until we have some way to grapple with the politicians that supposedly represent us, we are going to continue to be pawns. They will continue to not be responsive to our needs nor our requests for any kind of action. So seriously, one of the bottom lines in terms of getting a handle on what's going on, the lack of democracy in this country, you have to be able to get after the politicians and make them bear the consequences for not responding to our needs.
Thank you to everyone who is here. It's really
really heartening for all of us to see you guys and know that we've got folks who are going to take over. And thank you to the panel.